lesson fits within Unit 1, so we've looked at the Industrial Revolution. Now we're looking at the Age of Imperialism. We have looked at the main causes of imperial expansion. Last lesson we talked about colonisation, in particular in Australia. What was going on in Britain at this time?
They wanted to get rid of the convicts out of the ships that were moored in the harbours.
Yeah, not enough room, they were overflowing.
Overflowing, good. So overpopulation in Britain, they needed the space in Australia. And so it was a good, dumping ground.
Yeah, and I suppose it was take over a land, another area.
Yep. So that idea of power and kind of like expanding power. Yeah. Australia is quite far away from Britain. Do you think that was an advantage or a disadvantage? What do you think geographically? Market economies and having access to different areas.
It's an advantage for that sort of thing, they're closer to India and Asia.
Yeah, definitely. Might just have a look at this this cartoon. It's an imperialism cartoon from 1882, and so it's titled The Devilfish in Egyptian Waters. So John Bull from England, he embodied all these ideas of Britain at the time. So he's got his hand on Canada, Jamaica, over here there's Australia, Malta, Egypt. Does anyone know what these countries have in common?
They're all part of the English Commonwealth.
Yeah, so England has sort of got its hands on in all these different pockets. It's that idea of grabbing land in every continent, and that was a huge part of imperial expansion. Today's lesson we're going to keep going with colonisation of Australia, but we're going to look at experience and responses of the colonised peoples. And we're going to do this through looking at different perspectives. What is the historical importance of a perspective?
Somebody's opinion of how they perceive it to be.
And what do they do? What do perspectives do for us?
It can influence their interpretation of what happened.
Yep, good. So they can provide us with an understanding so we can form our own opinions.
A person's age can make a difference too.
Yeah,
an older person has a different perspective than what a younger person does.
Yeah, definitely. Age is a good factor. What else can we think of?
Education.
Education, yep. So someone who's educated.
Someone who's more educated might have more of an opinion than someone who's not educated.
Yep.
Religion and culture.
Religion and culture. Yeah, definitely. I think that's pretty important to this example. Their beliefs and their understandings of. What about gender?
Yeah.
Do you think that men and women had different perspectives?
Yeah, you talk about that time from England or Britain, it was whatever their husband thought.
Yeah. Lastly, what are some limitations and ramifications of gaining an understanding from perspectives?
It's only one person's point of view.
Yeah. Yeah. Bias, yeah. So looking at where the source came from. Charles Darwin's reactions to Aboriginality. What's Charles Darwin best known for?
Evolution theory, yeah.
Evolution theory, good. Good. So that all species, he kind of coined the idea that all species have descended over time from common ancestors. And he also had this idea that European civilization was superior to other civilizations. He was for the idea of colonisation, and it was everyone's right to be civilised in the way that Europeans are civilised. From Charles Darwin in 1836. What can we learn from this time period about this perspective?
Well, he was regarding them as savages, really. He was giving them recognition that they were good with a spear, but to him it was important to cultivate the ground and build houses, but to the Aborigines that wasn't part of their life.
Yeah.
And he may have had a perspective from someone else who told him what they were like.
Yeah.
And he's found that they're quite different from what he was first told.
Yeah, good. I think that's important as well, what affects a perspective, how experience plays a role. So maybe there's people that have a lot to say, but they haven't experienced, you know, the Aboriginal culture firsthand, and they haven't had a lot of contact with them. And the last side effect. So talking about the responses of Aborigines and with resistance, and it was because of this clash in cultures. And we have a letter to the Launceston Advisor in 1831, and this was a settler writing in. How does this perspective differ from Darwin's?
Well, he's saying that the white people actually come in and invaded their country, taken over, whereas Darwin said that, yeah, we should do it because they weren't as good as what white people are.
Yeah.
In a way, he's speaking for the Aborigines.
Yep. Comparing this perspective to Darwin's perspective, we can sort of understand that there's, within the context of colonisation of Australia, there's a spectrum of perspectives. There's not the Aborigines' view and then the white people's view. There's like, you know, on one end of the scale it's the Aborigines who have resisted colonisation. On the other end of the scale it's the, you know, the settlers who have kind of imposed colonisation. And then across the spectrum we have all these different perspectives. So this is sort of, he's showing empathy for the fact that this population has been invaded. Why might this perspective differ from Darwin's?
Because this person's actually seen what's been going on. Whereas Darwin might have just had an idea.
And this person's a settler too, so it doesn't say how long, but he's obviously living, you know, with and around the area, and he's obviously had some experience. Sounds like he's had some experience.
Yeah. A little handout for you. We're going to produce a creative piece of work. So this can be in the form of a letter, a poem, and you're taking on the perspective of someone at the time of colonisation in Australia. It could be a young Aboriginal writing a poem, so you need to think about the sort of language that might be used. You need to think about how they might be feeling, what their perspective might be. And so we're going to address the criteria, analyse and account for the different perspectives of individuals and groups in the past. What can you take out of this lesson?
Opinions vary greatly.
Yeah. And I think overall one of the most important things is that there's a spectrum. There's not two viewpoints in this topic.